Hello and welcome to Step Up World, the official broadcast of the Global Climate Action Summit. I'm your host, Rajesh Mirchandani, and with your help, we're bringing the summit to the world and the world to the summit. If you've been watching, you'll know that the summit has pretty much wrapped up now. And as it's been wrapping up, we're going to be reflecting on some of the commitments made, some of the conversations that have taken place, and we'll bring you interviews with some of the key speakers here. Remember, this summit has brought together more than 4,000 climate champions from all over the world, all sectors, all walks of life, world leaders, scientists, celebrities, campaigners, youth advocates, and all points in between. We've also been hearing from people from all over the world who are doing their part to protect the planet. And in the next hour on this show, we're going to be hearing from more of them. A really important part of this show, of course, has been hearing from you. And in a second, we'll tell you how you can get in touch with us. But coming up in this edition of Step Up World, we'll be hearing about a big commitment from a major global technology firm, with Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, and other commitments have been made by the private sector as well. We'll hear from Oxfam International and the World Bank about how global economics and finance can and must do more to tackle climate change if we're also going to reduce poverty. We'll speak with the UN Special Envoy for Youth about how young people are stepping up to tackle climate change wherever they are. And we'll have a special performance from musician and climate campaigner Rocky Dawuni. As I said, we want to hear from you. So let's find out how. You just saw it briefly there. Let's go back over now and check in with our social correspondent, Nicole Perez. Nicole.
Thanks, Rajesh. And thank you to everyone that's tuning in live right now. I am looking online and it's so exciting to see people watching from all over the world. So I'm going to give a few shout outs to some of our viewers. Hello, Kagna San from Cambodia, Martin Spacey from Lagos, Nigeria, Erica Klein from Germany, Alexander from Kenya, Aurora from the Philippines, and Christopher from Montreal, Canada. Thank you guys for joining us. And we want you to stay involved, keep asking questions, keep tuning in. We'll be looking online to get your questions answered. You can join the conversation online, tweet me at UN Foundation, and don't forget to use the hashtags #StepUp2018 and GCast2018. Your questions and messages may be shared on our live program with the biggest voices in climate action. Back to you, Rajesh.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much. We'll be checking back here with you during the show. Now, as we have been saying last couple of days while we've been broadcasting to you, we want to bring you the news. And we've seen some incredible announcements and commitments made here on the main stage at the Global Climate Action Summit. So we're going to dive into a couple of those for you right now. A major announcement came today from Prelude Ventures, the Children's Investment Fund, and the McKnight Foundation. They, between them, committed $4 billion in climate funding, and that's from a coalition of philanthropists over the next 5 years. Let's take a look at the moment that was announced.
As climate philanthropists, we are committed to supporting the vast array of solutions required to make progress. That is why we are proud to be here on behalf of these 29 donors to announce a joint commitment of $4 billion over the next 5 years to combat climate change.
$4 billion announcement there. The legal community also came out in force with 9 big law firms committing to partner with Stanford Law to provide a combined $15 million in free legal services to advance efforts to fight global climate change and bolster sustainability. Let's hear about that.
So I want you to welcome representatives from these great law firms. They're going to come up right now. Come on up. Cooley, Dentons, Hogan Lovell, Holland and Knight, Latham and Watkins, Morrison and Forrester, Sonsini, Goodrich and Rosati, and Arnold and Porter. This initiative is being launched in honor of the late, great Nancy McFadden.
Commitment by law firms. And today's been full of commitments, actually. Too many to show here from cities, businesses, philanthropists, investors, and different communities. But we'll just run through a couple more. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti announced that his city is joining 26 others to announce that their emissions are on the decline. We saw the launch of Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, which includes 9 governors from Brazil, Indonesia, and the US. New York City announced the divestment of its pension fund from fossil fuels, taking $5 billion out of the industry. Earlier this week, New York joined with London to build a coalition of cities dedicated to divesting from fossil fuels. And Pasquale Romano, the president and CEO of ChargePoint, the world's leading electric vehicle charging network, well, he made a landmark commitment to pledge 2.5 million new electric vehicle charging stations by 2025. Those are just a small number of the commitments and pledges that have been made in the last couple of days here at the Global Climate Action Summit. Why are we doing that? Because we all need to step up to tackle climate change. And just to remind us of the importance of that, let's think about around the world some of the most vulnerable communities. They're indigenous peoples. They've often lived off the land for thousands of years, and they've had a very incredibly close connection to the earth. Now they're speaking out and they're taking action themselves. Hindu Umaru Ibrahim grew up in a rural community in Chad. She went on to develop a 3D mapping tool to help communities manage their land. And she was also a speaker at the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015. I'm very happy to say that she stopped by the studio earlier and spoke to me as well. Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, great to have you on the show. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, your work for your Mbororo community in Chad brought you into climate discussions at the United Nations, brought you into contact with the highest levels of government. What do you think that the UN learned from you, that the world leaders learned from you and indigenous communities? You're right on the front lines of climate change there. What's your unique contribution to the knowledge?
Firstly, coming from the indigenous community, and especially from my people who are the nomadic pastoralists, so we have a lot to teach to other peoples who are outside of our life. So our unique relation with our environment, where we learn from all our ecosystem, that's very particular. You cannot see that in the science, or you cannot make a PhD on it, because those traditional knowledge coming from the centuries and centuries of knowledge developed.
Because your peoples have been living so close to the ground,
exactly.
So connection with the earth.
Exactly. So our unique connection make us understand all the environment around us. And that knowledge are not known at the school. And most of the peoples who are at the UN, so they do not know how we are experiencing our daily life. And when we talked about the climate change, it's not the issue who we can plan. It's the issue of changing about hour or day or season. So we live on this. So we know how this specific change happening, and that needs to be connected directly with the decision makers around our life who are at the UN.
Right. So, and faced with the impacts of climate change on our communities, you actually stepped up yourself and did something which is, really impressive by creating a 3D mapping tool. And I wonder if you could just briefly and simply for people like me explain what exactly it is and what it does.
Yeah, actually the 3D participatory mapping, it's a tool where we call it participatory because the community didn't went to school, but they have their own knowledge. And then we have the science knowledge, which is a value add that do not understand how the traditional life is. So for us, it's the way to put those two knowledge together, build the map on a 3D, and then put the knowledges with the communities. And it's a different ages, from the young peoples to the old peoples, from the man to the woman. So you have all the different knowledges and different ages of knowledge who are putting down. Then it's helped the community to plan the better management of the natural resources.
I see. Now, to be honest, people watching this, most of them probably won't live in rural communities, and very few of them will create a 3D mapping tool. But I want you to tell people, what can they do themselves to step up for climate action?
I think climate change is not the issue of rural or capitals. It's the issue of everybody, individual or community as ours. So the role of everyone is counting. They are in town, they have to think about consumption, production. They need to think about the peoples that they do not see, like mine, who are impacted every day by the action that they are taking, even far, but it's impacting the same atmosphere that we have. So that's count for us. And we want them to know climate change is real. No one deny it. Even if they deny it, they know exactly because of their own interests. So they have to save them future. We are impacted today. We are experiencing the bad issues today, but it can be them tomorrow.
I see. Okay. Hindu, it's been really interesting, fascinating to hear you talk and deliver your message to people all over the world. Thank you very much for joining us on Step Up World.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.
So now Hindu Umaru Ibrahim is an Indigenous rights leader, Indigenous people community spokesperson. Indigenous communities also led the 30,000 strong march that took place in San Francisco a few days ago, the Climate March. We were on the march, recording and covering it for you, and we spoke to a couple of those Indigenous leaders from South America. Check it out.
Changes in climate affect us directly and immediately. We feel it right away. And as Indigenous peoples, we have been denied our rights for generations, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to make those who are in authority, those who are in positions that can make a change, hear us and listen to us.
I'm here representing 34 in the indigenous nation of the Amazonian part of Bolivia. So we are here as a guardian of the forest, which is an organization that comes indigenous people around the world, Indonesia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, and the Yurok nation here in California.
Climate change has already started to impact communities. And I think because we live off the land, we feel it more and we recognize it right away. I can tell you, like in my country, Guyana, for example, the climate patterns are changing. We can no longer tell when it's going to be sun, when it's going to be rain. This in itself inhibits our planting seasons because now you have communities being left without food as a result of them not planting on time. We believe as Indigenous peoples, we hold the key to fighting climate change. We understand nature because we live there. We know the forests, we know the mountains, we know the rivers.
We have our ancestral knowledge, right? And that's a knowledge that was accumulated in thousands and thousands of years that we need to transmit to the governments, to the people. As Indigenous people, we are not against the development, but we don't want to develop and then kill us.
We're only fighting for land. We're only fighting for protection of our land, protection of the earth. You know, what we're fighting for is to save humanity.
On Step Up World. Now, many people at and around the summits have been talking about the link between poverty and climate, how climate change impacts the poorest in the world the most and they're the least able to prepare or recover. The World Bank's mission is to end poverty. So what is your role in addressing climate change to do that?
I think it's very clear that as you get increased typhoons, increased temperature, you're going to see an impact on poverty. And some of the analytics that we've done shows that you'll have 100 million more people living in poverty by 2030. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is to ensure that that doesn't become a disaster, that you're giving opportunities to build resilience and to accelerate the low carbon transition. But at the same time, it's not just defensive to stop the impact. There are opportunities in the climate economy. The new climate economy has shown, their report has shown that you could generate $26 trillion of benefits from a shift to a low-carbon economy by 2030 and create 65 million more jobs.
This is the report that came out recently.
Exactly.
Climate economy.
And so it creates an opportunity. So I think it's partly to protect poor people from the effects of climate change, but also to create the opportunities for jobs in solar rooftop installation, new forms of agriculture. So it's both an opportunity and protecting against it.
Let me just go back to one thing you said about your forecast of 100 million more people living in poverty by 2030, given the effects of climate change. And the context of that is declining poverty around the world. So what's your reaction to that forecast?
Well, the way I would put it is that unless we can address climate change by reducing emissions and building resilience, we will reverse the development and poverty reduction gains that we've seen over the last 2 decades. That's what's at stake here.
So what is the bank's role in doing that?
So I think there's a range of things that we can do. One is by providing finance. We've stepped up on finance. Last year, we put over $20 billion of our own financing into climate change. That's double what we did before Paris. But it's not just the finance. We're pushing the cutting edge. Okay, so first of all, half of that is going into adaptation and building resilience. It's not just mitigation. Secondly, when we're doing mitigation, we're not funding the run-of-the-mill standard solar PVs anymore. We're pushing the edge on batteries, geothermal, where that technology is, and into more vulnerable environments, getting low solar prices in Zambia, for example. But beyond that, we're also trying to crowd in private sector finance. We crowded in almost $9 billion of finance from the private sector last year, up 27% from the year before. But as we do that, again, it's not just the finance that we bring, it's creating the policy environments that allow that to happen, to try and push the frontier to help countries to move towards this low carbon and resilient future.
Now, this summit is about the activities of actors at what we call the subnational level,
yes,
below national governments. And businesses have really made a lot of announcements here as well. And you talked about climate finance crowding in private sector players. Are you seeing that landscape change, more private sector organizations and financing coming in?
Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of private financing coming. If you just look at the growth in the green bonds market, we were instrumental in setting up the green bonds market. But 5 years ago, it was about $3 billion. Now it's hitting $200 billion, that market. So you're seeing that finance coming in. You're seeing a lot of private sector actors investing in renewable energy and agriculture. But we still have to go further, and we still have to go faster. And so what we see our role is working with the private sector and the public sector and on policy to push the agenda forward. For example, we're working on batteries, on cooling and air conditioning, on putting solar into places like the Sahel. To do that, the private sector can step in, but they're not going to be able to do it by themselves. Okay. It's going to take public finance, concessional finance, policy reform in order to make this all happen.
And the World Bank sits at the heart of all of that. Okay. John Room, thanks very much for joining us on Step Up World.
Thank you very much.
That was John Room from the World Bank, the Senior Director for Climate Change there, talking to me about how he's seen private sector companies get more involved in both financing and implementing climate change solutions. And there were many commitments from that sector here at the summit. In fact, the cloud computing firm Salesforce, which is a big force here in Silicon Valley, made its own commitment via its CEO and founder, Mark Benioff. Earlier, he came by the Step Up World studio, and he told us about it. Mark Benioff, here at the Global Climate Action Summit, Salesforce has announced something called the Step Up Declaration, which we think is very appropriate. It's an alliance. Tell us more about it and what companies are signed on.
Well, we've come to a point where every industry needs to decarbonize, and we need to go sector by sector by sector to decarbonize every industry, and we've got to go company by company by company within every industry. And of course, we're in the technology industry. Salesforce is the largest tech company here in San Francisco. And we have all pulled together already about 24 companies, all who are committed to decarbonize. Of course, there's more than that in the tech industry who want to do that, but that's the folks who are now committed to this Step Up Declaration.
And when you say decarbonize, what exactly are the actions that you'll be taking at Salesforce to do that?
Well, the number one thing that we're doing is we're going completely net zero in all of our data centers, as well as for all of our buildings, for all of our employees worldwide and their global travel, that we're making sure that we're number one, a net zero company, and then going fully 100% renewable in all of our energy. This is really critical for us. Of course, we're a major energy consumer because we run data centers. We need to make sure those data centers are perfectly clean.
How are you going to do that? I mean, they take up so much. They use so much energy. Data centers. Offsets, planting trees. What are you doing?
Everything. We have to work with a full portfolio of partners to make that happen. As you can imagine, it's no easy task to make a data center green and to get it to go net zero. So we have pulled together a full portfolio of those partners, exactly the types that you're mentioning, to do that. And we've applied that not only to our data centers, but even to our buildings. In fact, our new Salesforce Tower here in San Francisco is already 100% renewable, and it also is a Blackwater building, which saves about 30,000 gallons of water a day.
One of the things that we've been noticing about the climate, and you won't have missed this, is that there are campaigners outside on the streets, and a lot of the conversation on social has been talking about the opinion of many that businesses are paying lip service to tackling climate change, and then often businesses could be the problem. So I want to, give you a chance to respond to that. Mm-hmm. Say, what is the, how do you, you've talked about what you're doing. Why do you feel that your commitment is legitimate? And when people are saying, you're still making a load of money, you're still burning carbon in whatever way you're doing it, how do you then respond to that?
Well, I think the number one way you have to look at how are we going to create systemic change? And the only way you're going to create systemic change is through multi-stakeholder dialogue, bringing in all stakeholders, which includes business, government, non-governmental organizations. Those activists who are protesting on the street are a key stakeholder. We have to have a big tent, bring everybody in, have that level of collaboration and engagement, and then we turn that into multi-stakeholder action. And that's the way that we create change. That's the way that we are creating change and doing all of these things. But for anybody to individuate themselves from the change, I think is making a big mistake, because they're not really bringing their voice into the conversation. It's only through engagement that we can create this new world that we all want to get to. And we've seen that over and over again. Another great area that we've done tremendous work in is in the area of equality. But for us to be able to get equality to happen, whether it's gender equality or LGBTQ equality, it's the same process. We have to bring in everybody, and we cannot eliminate any stakeholder.
Okay, so finally, this summit is about celebrating and showcasing action at the levels below governments. Businesses are a key part of that. What is the message?
We don't consider ourselves below a government.
No, of course not.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, governments probably wouldn't either. Not when you're the size.
Not the way government is today.
Yeah, but when you're thinking about what is the message you want this summit to send to, say, the UN General Assembly in a couple of weeks, or the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit in 2019 and beyond, what is that message?
Well, I think when we look at these major non-governmental organizations like the United Nations, or governments coming together like the G7 or the G20, we have to prioritize these climate issues. It's one of the reasons that I was so inspired that the G7 put oceans, on the agenda for the first time in the June program. That was a huge step forward. Of course, our oceans are at tremendous risk. It could be overfishing, plastics in the ocean, acidification, coral bleaching. I mean, the list goes on and on. To see the G7 getting on that is critical. They're a critical stakeholder. But in the same way that I, don't want to eliminate those governments, I think those activists also need to come in and have the conversation here. Extracting yourself is not going to allow you to help motivate the change going forward.
Okay, Mark Benioff, thank you very much indeed for
joining
us on Step Up World.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
So from commitments made by private sector organizations to actions of young people to tackle climate change, the UN Foundation's sister organization, the Better World Campaign, recently released results of a new poll of 17 to 35-year-olds in the US that found that group ranked environmental issues such as pollution, health of the planet, and oceans as the most important international issue for the United States to address this year. And young people around the world are stepping up to meet this challenge with bold, creative, and inspiring solutions. Let's hear now how young climate activists from Ghana to the Philippines to right here in San Francisco are taking on climate change their way.
The first time I fell in love with the environment was when I was in primary school.
I've always loved nature, and that's why I feel like I need to work to protect it.
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so nature has always been such a fundamental part of who I am.
The world is so much bigger than humans, that there are so many discoveries to be explored, so many treasures to be found, and more importantly, that everything around us is connected to one another. And this endless possibilities is why I love nature.
And I first fell in love with nature ever since I can remember. I live in the gorgeous Pacific Northwest where everything is evergreen all the time, and there is such amazing wildlife all around me that it just kills me to see it all being destroyed.
If we want to change the world, we cannot leave behind 1.3 billion young people.
Youth have immense talents and an immense power to stop the climate crisis and create the world that we want to see.
This is not a message of fear. This is a call to action, a hope for a more resilient and sustainable world where everyone has a chance at a better life.
I am Amira, an organizer from Puerto Rico.
I'm Ashley Graham. needlework craft artist and marketing manager in San Francisco, California, USA.
I'm Jamie Margolin. I'm a 16-year-old high school student and the founder and executive director of Zero Hour.
This is JL Algo, Science Policy Associate of the Climate Reality Project Philippines, a proud Filipino and citizen of this earth. And this is my call to action.
It's time to step up, world.
It's time to step up, world.
It is time to step up, world.
It's time to step up, world.
We had a great response when we asked young people around the world to send us their videos, and that was in no short measure due to the actions and the call to action given out by my next guest. She's the UN Secretary General's Youth Envoy, Jayathma Wickramanayake. She's in the studio with me now. It's wonderful to see you as ever, Jayathma. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, you were appointed to address the needs and rights of young people and to bring the work of the UN closer to them. You've been here as a co-chair of the Global Climate Action Summit. We just saw you on stage at the closing session on the main stage. How big and how loud a voice do you think that young people have had here at the summit, and what difference do you think that will make?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And I also want to give a big shout out to those amazing youth leaders who were kind enough to record those messages and send us their solutions, innovations, and share it with us to really say how they are stepping up to take climate action. And really, it's not different in any part of the world. It's if you look at Africa, Asia, the Pacific Islands, you will find young people coming up with amazing solutions to issues that sometimes our policymakers call too political or too sensitive or too big of a deal to solve. So it's really inspiring to see those solutions and the positive aspects of it.
Why do you think young people are able to get to those solutions that maybe politicians aren't?
I think the first and foremost, we have very clear intentions. I think we don't come with any historical baggages or political agendas. We basically want to live the world that we live a better place. So that is, I think, where the intention is coming from. But that's also, we are a generation, especially the millennial generation that I belong to, and Gen Z, the generation after me, we grew up with technology. We are used to finding solutions using technology to most of the issues that we are facing. So we are using that creativity and those skills that we have, apply them to solve issues that are called global issues, but really finding those local solutions in our communities.
And talking about using technology, you've created something called the #Generation, which is a movement for civic and political engagement for young people. And then in a couple of weeks' time in New York, you're going to be helping the Secretary General of the UN launch the UN's new strategy for youth. Tell me a little bit, I know you can't give away what's going to be in that strategy, we don't want to scoop the UN, right. But tell me, how do you think young people can get more involved, and how can the world interact and engage more with young people?
Yeah, I think that question needs to be flipped to the other side. I think the question really should be, how do we create more spaces that young people can participate? Because everywhere we go, every country that I go to, the desire to participate is an inherent quality of young people. But our doors, for an example, at the United Nations are always closed. And the idea of the strategy is to really open up that doors and to create spaces where young people can meaningfully participate. And I say meaningfully with a lot of emphasis, because most often youth participation gets tokenized. Young people are doing amazing work on the ground, but we usually only get them when we need a youth speaker or when we need young people in the room to fill up a room. But that shouldn't be the spirit of it. It's important to engage young people meaningfully, because these ideas, these solutions, these policies, these resolutions that we are talking about is going to impact our lives. Yeah. The next 40, 50, 60 years of our lives, we are going to live with the consequences of those decisions being made. So that's why we need a seat at the table, and that's why we as young people need that access to have that seat at the table.
Well, we're going to get one young person involved right now because we asked people on social media to send in questions for you, and lots of them came in. So we're going to take it over to our social station, and Nicole Perez is over there who has a question for you from social media. Go ahead, take it away, Nicole.
Thanks, Rajesh, and thanks, Jayathma, for being here. So we are looking through all the social media conversations across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and getting a ton of really great questions for you. Sihaj Sani, a youth volunteer and entrepreneur from Chennai, India, asks, how do you engage today's constantly distracted youth? He mentions that this is his biggest challenge as a youth worker and activist.
That's a very good question.
Yes, I think first of all, I wouldn't necessarily 100% agree with all young people are distracted. At least majority of young people that we see, especially those who saw on the video, or the young people that are involved in most of the causes that affect our world, are actually really focused on making our world a better place. But I do also understand sometimes it could be distracting to see issues and think that they're bigger or too large for us to solve. For an example, I personally felt that about climate change. As you said, I've been working, or my activism was basically based on young people, political and civic participation, creating political spaces, empowering young female political leaders. And then when I came to the UN, and I actually had to learn about climate change. I had to sign up for courses online in universities and learn about climate change. And then I saw that there is actually an interlinkage between climate change and women's political participation. Because when we have more women in parliament, those parliaments produce more climate-friendly policies. So those young people who might be distracted in the way that maybe they are using social media, maybe they are working on peace and security, maybe they are working on sexual health, but everything is linked to climate change. Yeah. And that's important that we send out that message in a proper way so that everyone's able to understand that and mobilize towards that same goal.
Okay, Jayathna Wickramanayake, the UN Secretary General's Youth Envoy. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you very much for joining us today on Step Up World.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Jayathna was just talking about the interlinkages between issues. It's a very good point. It's right at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals, as you can see on the wall behind us. And earlier in the show, we talked about the link between climate and poverty. We've heard about big commitments from major companies to tackle climate change, but some people say that our current economic systems are more part of the problem than the solution. One of the leading voices in that debate is Winnie Byanyima, who's the Executive Director of Oxfam International. You know her, of
So
course.
inspiring.
She came by earlier, and I spoke with her earlier. Winnie Byanyima, you are a long-time anti-poverty and climate justice campaigner. We're standing here in front of the SDGs as a reminder of the interconnectedness of issues like poverty and climate change as well. But I want to get a sense from you of, how do you think climate change exacerbates inequality, and to what extent do you think our economic systems currently prop up climate change? It's something you've been talking about here at the summit.
Okay, the problem is with our economic model. It is flawed. It is rigged against the majority, and it is set up not to count the cost of economic activity to the environment. So rising inequality, extreme inequality, and climate change are both symptoms of a rigged economic model. Why do I say that? In this economy, as I said, the cost of the environment is not counted. Equally, the contributions of very many ordinary people, particularly women, such as their contributions to care, the care work of children, of sick people, of elderly, that whole contribution is not counted in the economy. So the result is that we have an economy that is funneling profits to rich people. Last year alone, Oxfam calculated that 82% of the total wealth created last year went to the top 1%. The bottom half of humanity, 3.7 billion, got nothing of that wealth. That is the same with climate change. Climate change is the result of, is a crisis caused by the emissions of the rich, but who is being hit hardest? It is the poor people. So we have to change the economic model if we are to arrest global warming and arrest rising economic inequality.
Do you get a sense, or to what extent do you think that there is movement to change that economic model to make it more inclusive when, for example, here at the summit, there have been commitments and pledges made by major companies?
Well, we are standing here in front of the Sustainable Development Goals. That itself is progress, that the whole world came together and said, leave no one behind, and said that we must not trade off the environment for growth. We must find a win-win-win where human beings, society wins, the environment wins, and the economy grows.
But do you think the businesses are actually heeding that now?
Not yet, and we fight with them, and we work with them also constructively. because the business model is itself connected to the economic model. Businesses are currently structured to maximize for shareholders. You know, it wasn't always like this. 30 years ago, in the UK, businesses were sharing 10% of profits with shareholders. The rest of the profits was being plowed back in the business to workers, to research, and so on. Today, do you know what that percentage is? 70% of total profits goes to the owners of capital. So we've got an extreme form of shareholder capitalism that's trashing the environment, trashing poor people, trashing women, and if we don't change that, we'll continue roasting the earth and we'll continue having millions of hungry people. This week alone, the UN released its report and said for the 3rd year running, hunger is increasing. 1 out of every 9 people on earth goes to bed hungry in a world of plenty.
So given all of that you've said and the interconnectedness of these issues, poverty, hunger, climate change, if there's one call to action you make from this summit, what's it going to be and to whom?
One call to action? Well, it is that all of us, that climate change, poverty, extreme inequality are not the problem of that person. They are our problem. Everyone must take an action. And for me, the action that's most important as a person from civil society is to rise, is to put pressure on governments to organize our economies differently, change the model. It is to put pressure on businesses to find alternative models where they share the value with workers, with producers, and where they plow back in the environment and in the communities.
Okay.
So we all have something to do. It's something different for each person depending on where they are. If you're a global CEO of a business or you're an activist like me, you put on your T-shirt and go on the street and protest and show people power, show that people want change.
But you're also part of the conversation here at the summit as well. And part of your role as an activist is to be inside.
Exactly. And to speak truth to power, and I'm doing that.
You are doing
but I also work with businesses. Like I was sitting next to the CEO of Starbucks. Oxfam, we worked with Starbucks. First, we hit them hard on how they were exploiting coffee farmers in Ethiopia. Then they came to the table and made a better business arrangement with the government of Ethiopia and with coffee farmers. And that was a result of some pressure, but also some negotiation on how to share value.
Okay.
So we work constructively with them, but we also apply pressure where it's needed.
Okay, well, we're very glad to hear that you do that. Winnie Byanyima from Oxfam, thank you so much for joining us on Step Up World.
Thank you for having me.
Winnie Byanyima there, voicing some provocative questions that many other people are talking about here at the Global Climate Action Summit. And amongst all that as well, we've been hearing real commitments from companies on sustainability at the summit. And again, those tough questions, asking whether business is doing enough and if businesses are sincere in the commitments they're making. Now, if companies want to demonstrate their credentials on being socially responsible, they can do so through something called the UN Global Compact. It's the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, has more than 10,000 companies from 170 countries signed up. And part of their work is a program called Caring for Climate. And that signed up 400 global businesses to carry out solutions themselves and help shape public policy as well. Earlier, I spoke with Leila Kabasi, who's the Chief of Programs for the UN Global Compact. Take a listen. Leila Kabasi, thanks very much for joining us on Step Up World. There's been a lot of conversation about businesses' role in tackling climate change, and I'm keen to understand from you at the Global Compact, the UN Global Compact, what is it that you think more and more companies are beginning to understand about the economic benefits of sustainable production and operations? Because let's be honest, they're not doing it because it's just because it's the right thing to do, because they've realized the bottom line implications. What is it that they're beginning to understand?
That's right, Rajesh. You're absolutely right. There is a very, very important bottom line implication. And not only this, there is a very big opportunity out there on the market for more and more companies to step up to the climate challenge. We essentially know that we have, say, 2 years to change course, or we're going to face dangerous and maybe irreversible climate change. So we're here in California to see the enormous progress already that's been made, particularly on the side of business, but not only, also on the policy side.
Have you been impressed by what you've heard and seen here?
Very impressed by the many solutions that are being put out there. It's very clear that there's not one pathway, but there are many options for how, in particular, businesses can contribute. So we're very impressed by this surge of the attention around climate change. One of the concern in going from this conference to another conference over the past 10 or 15 years, one of the concern is that we need to also connect with people outside of this universe. And bring those that are not yet converted to the idea that there is a major implication for your bottom line, there are major opportunities for businesses, and this is a big effort that needs to be done.
But there are also many members of the public who also don't believe that what businesses are saying, or maybe don't believe is a bit strong, but are a little bit sceptical that when businesses say, yeah, we're going sustainable, that it's actually a legitimate action rather than PR. So, what have you seen, or how do you at the UN Global Compact assess whether what a company is saying is actually legitimate? Actually, they're getting on board properly. They're not just, greenwashing.
This is a very important topic, not only for climate change, but also for the whole of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. On the topic of climate change, at the UN Global Compact, we're very proud to be part of the Science Based Target Initiative. We're announcing this week that nearly 500 companies have the intention to set their greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets according to what the latest science says. And so we're pushing for that to become the new norm. And we're bringing the 10,000 companies that are part of the UN Global Compact to also think in terms of what are my boundaries, what are the boundaries of my operations, what is the amount of CO2 that as a company I can emit and still be within the limits that the Paris Agreement have put forward.
And that's your accountability mechanism there, right?
This is the accountability mechanism with lots of technical roadmaps to assess sector by sector how a company can set targets that are indeed compatible with the threshold of staying well below 2 degrees Celsius.
Okay, Leila Kabassi from the UN Global Compact. Pleasure to have you on the Step Up World. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, not only has our next guest been Grammy nominated and named one of Africa's top 10 global stars by CNN, but he's also a vocal champion for issues such as climate and health. Rocky Dawuni is an ambassador also for the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, which aims to help stop millions of people getting sick each day because they're having to use fuels like wood and charcoal to cook. I'm really glad to say that not only Rocky is he here to talk to us, but he's actually going to play for us later on in the show as well. Rocky, fantastic to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on Step Up World.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
It's our honor to have you on the show, Rocky.
Thank you.
There's been a focus on climate and health at the summit. When you're talking to people about it, how do you best explain the connection between those two and why they're so important to deal with together?
Well, the important thing that we have to know is that, first of all, the issue of climate, climate is going to impact literally the increase in temperatures around the world is also going to result in like a lot of diseases, just, being able to have, there's going to be an increase in diseases, And for me, the most important thing is for that knowledge and information to be available to people, and for people to know what role they can play in that, So as a musician, I try as much as possible to educate myself on what needs to be done. And then through my advocacy and also connection to communities I'm able to explain in simple terms, to people. And at the same time to really inspire, individuals to go out there and also become advocates for what needs to be done. Because in the long run, to solve an issue like climate, it's a big deal for most people. They don't even know where to start. But if you are able to let them know that this is going to impact livelihoods, it's going to impact, their health, it's really going to impact what communities look like right now. It's going to literally shake what human society is right now, and it requires all of us to be aware of it and act on it. So being able to convey this message and have people be part of the solution for me is the key thing. Yeah.
And there's also another element to it as well, isn't there? I mean, if you tackle climate and health, especially through something like clean cooking, you're also empowering women as well. You're also reaching gender equality goals
yes.
as well.
Well, for me, clean cooking, I have always believed that, first of all, individuals have to know how they can be able to contribute, to solving this solution, to have a solution for this issue. And one of the simple ways, because millions of people around the world, cook with, solid fuels, and the opportunity to move people from that into cleaner versions, it's one way for them to not only to solve, household air pollution, which, literally adds, black carbon and exacerbates, climate change, by the same time too, a public health thing that helps them to live a very healthy life. So moving from that is one way of them being able to contribute to that. And then in addition to that too, also planting trees, creating opportunities, because women and children are the most who are impacted by this, the issue of air pollution. So if this also creates an opportunity, first of all, to solve the issue of women's health due to this, and then opportunity for women industries to be part of that, then we are also helping elevate, the economic aspect and prosperity of women. So it's
and if you
creating
help women, you help the family, you help the economy.
Exactly,
well.
exactly, yes.
So listen, your music has inspired us, and I know that you're going to inspire us again, and everyone who's watching later on. So we're going to leave you to get ready, rehearse. I mean, it doesn't look like you need to do much to get ready. We're going to give you a few minutes to get yourselves together as well, and we'll be back to you at the end of the show. But for now, Rocky, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Hi again, everyone. Nicole Perez here, your social media correspondent at Step Up World. Now, yesterday, we asked you all on Instagram what you would choose to have as your climate superpower. You all had some inspiring and creative responses, so let's take a look. Maria Mendez shared that she would like to be able to freeze water to prevent the sea level rise and help protect animals such as polar bears. Lime Bike co-founder Andrew Savage would have a pen to write the regulation that we need now to solve climate problems. And Oskari Oinen from Finland says he would want the ability to control the amount of quality and location of all winds, clouds, rains, tornadoes, and other weather patterns. Thanks so much, and keep your questions coming, keep your messages coming. Tweet me at UN Foundation, and don't forget to use the hashtags StepUp2018 and GCast2018. Back to you, Rajesh.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Some really inspiring suggestions there from people around the world, and inspiring others to take on a challenge as big as climate change. Well, that takes creativity too. There have been many events here at and around the Global Climate Action Summit this week that have been focused on the role of artists in communicating climate change. In fact, if you just walk around the streets around the Moscone Centre here, you'll see people dressed up in strange costumes, on stilts, walking around, doing performance art, all in the streets. It's become a real celebration of climate action. We spoke with two curators of an exhibition here about how art can inspire action.
Nothing less than our future and the fate of humankind depends on how we rise to the climate challenge. It affects every aspect of the work of the United Nations. Keeping our planet's warming to well below 2 degrees is essential for global prosperity, people's well-being, and the security of nations. And that is why next September I will convene a climate summit to bring climate action to the top of the international agenda.
Okay, so as you will have gathered, that was not a couple of artists in San Francisco. That was actually the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. A little premature playing that for you because we wanted to remind you of the task ahead. We might come back to that to hear a little bit more of it later on in the programme, but let's explore the art world here now around the Global Climate Action Summit that's been taking place in San Francisco. Let's check out this video with a couple of curators.
What are we doing about this? How are we representing this? How are we talking about this? How are we translating the kind of narratives about this?
Climate change is just so hard to wrap your mind around that I think art can show little glimpses.
Climate change actually forces us to understand that there may be something happening both so slowly and so quickly that we might not even have the familiarity with those modes of time. Generating curiosity is a goal of mine and a goal of the show, and maybe people can have a different conversation than they would normally have, and they would come up with other questions.
A lot of artists deal with environment and landscape in different ways, and I just think that the conversations kind of exist within their own communities, and so the work really is how do we get more of that, the interdisciplinary dialogue happening, and that kind of support for that dialogue.
I feel more recruited into the movement than I did before, and science and politics and these things they're not my languages, and so once I had this thing of art and curation and critical writing, I was like, oh, I understand, there's like a way in.
And I think it's also really important to work with other people, you know, to like, you know, I'm an artist, but I've supported other artists and to be in this show, and that kind of collaboration is absolutely essential because we are all in this together.
So, those were a couple of artists in San Francisco. Now, I want to just backtrack a little bit because we do want to, as we think about how the Global Climate Action Summit is wrapping up, we want to think ahead now. In just over a week from now, world leaders and many others who've been here will gather for the United Nations General Assembly and for Climate Week. And then in a year from now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will host his own climate summit, and that's in 2019. And remember, if we're thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals, which were launched in 2015, 2019 is 4 years in, 2020 is 1/3 of the way, and we really need to know how we are progressing on all the SDGs, including climate, as soon as possible to make sure that by 2030 we can reach the world that we want. So I just thought before we go, it would be really helpful to remind ourselves of the challenge at hand. And this is a little clip from the Secretary General's speech earlier this week, in which he reminded us of what we have to actually achieve. Let's take a listen to that again.
Nothing less than our future and the fate of humankind depends on how we rise to the climate challenge. It affects every aspect of the work of the United Nations. Keeping our planet's warming to well below 2 degrees is essential for global prosperity, people's well-being, and the security of nations. And that is why next September I will convene a climate summit to bring climate action to the top of the international agenda.
Okay, so that is setting our agenda for the next 12 months. Climate Summit held by the UN Secretary General in 2019. Of course, here at the Global Climate Action Summit, we have been celebrating action that's already been taking place at all levels, all sectors, all around the world. And some of the most active actors, some of the most active and most ambitious players in that are mayors from around the world. In fact, some 4 of them have been here in San Francisco for the summit. Around the world, we sent our cameras and we gathered this video courtesy of our friends at the C40 Cities. Take a look.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hola, soy Carla Rubilar Barahona, intendenta de la región metropolitana de Santiago.
My name is Kazumi Kobayashi, Deputy Mayor of the City of Yokohama.
Hello, my name is Frank Jensen. I'm Lord Mayor of Copenhagen.
Hello, my name is Patricia DeLoe, Executive Mayor of Cape Town.
Hola, yo soy Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, jefe de gobierno de la ciudad de Buenos Aires.
Hello, I'm Yuriko Koike, Governor of Tokyo.
I'm Rob Kempsing, the Secretary for the Environment, Hong Kong, China.
Hi, my name is Eckhard Wilsner. I'm since 11 years now mayor of a wonderful city in Germany named Heidelberg.
Climate change is affecting all of us and we share the responsibility for the future of our planet.
Como autoridades tenemos que impulsar que otras instituciones y también la ciudadanía se comprometan con la lucha contra el cambio climático.
And I believe that cities, as drivers of change, have shown that they can walk the talk in addressing climate change.
Urgent action on climate change to deliver the highest goals of the Paris Agreement is vitally important.
Es fundamental que las grandes ciudades cumplamos con las metas establecidas en el Acuerdo de París para reducir los efectos del cambio climático, que son cruciales para nuestro presente y nuestro futuro.
As mayor of Warsaw, I'm determined to act, but we can't do it alone. That's why I am calling on state governments,
businesses,
investors and citizens to join me
and step up ambition.
Join me and step up ambition. Let's work together.
So we're talking about ambition and action here at the Global Climate Action Summit. They're not the only ones stepping up. The summit identified and chose 23 climate trailblazers from around the world for their incredible innovation and dedication to bold climate action in their communities. Let's hear from 3 of these inspiring trailblazers from 3 different continents.
What drives me to do this work is that really I've been of a generation that has taken from the sea and taken from our environment and returned very little, and we can't continue to do this. My work is inspired by the leaving an environment for the next generation. We cannot continue to overuse our environment in the way we've done over the last decades and century.
I grew up in a farm, surrounded by vegetation and animals. Nature was always a part of my life.
My favorite place in nature is the ocean. I think many of us grow up dreaming about being astronauts and exploring distant stars and galaxies. We have a totally alien world here on this planet, and it's home to some of the most majestic and incredible life imaginable, and it's an amazing and awesome place to go visit whenever I get the chance to.
My work has involved campaigning for marine protected areas around Scotland, and especially off my island, the Isle of Arran. The areas that we have protected, besides being biodiversity hotspots, are also blue carbon stores. My call to action is a call to action to the UK and Scottish Government to conserve and protect important blue carbon stores.
To combat climate change, I've been striving to do something about the charcoal production. I always campaign for stopping the cutting of trees because we live off environment, the natural resources of our country, 100%. It is charcoal production is one of our biggest problems in Somaliland. And in order to stop it, we have to really campaign.
Together with Gator Halpern, I'm one of the founders of Coral Vita, a company that grows corals to restore dying reefs. Working with some of the world's leading coral scientists, we grow corals up to 50 times faster, which translates into months rather than decades, while strengthening corals' resiliency to warming and acidifying oceans that threaten their health. We've lost up to half the world's reefs since the 1970s and are projected to lose up to 90% by 2050. Now, this is obviously an ecological catastrophe, but it's also a massive socioeconomic challenge as reefs support up to 1 billion people around the world, 25% of marine life, underpin tourism economies, fisheries, and shelter coastlines from storms. By growing corals through a commercial land-based coral farming model, we hope to deploy large-scale restoration projects all around the world so that we can preserve reefs for future generations.
My name is Howard Wood, and I'm chair of the Community of Arran Seabed Trust on the Isle of Arran.
My name is Shukri Haj Ismail. I'm the Minister of Environment and Rural Development.
My name is Sam Teicher, and I'm the founder and Chief Reef Officer of Coral Vita.
And I think and I hope that the world will now step up and take real decisive action on climate change.
And this is my call to action. It's time to step up, world.
This is my call for action. It is time to step up, world.
Indeed, those were some of the global climate trailblazers telling us about what they're doing in their communities. And I'm very happy to say we are joined by another climate trailblazer. This is Natalie Isaacs, the founder of 1 Million Women, which is a global movement to empower women with climate-smart lifestyle solutions. Natalie, thank you for joining us on Step Up World. Tell me a little bit about how 1 Million Women actually does this. How do you empower women?
So we empower women and girls to live with the least impact on the planet, and our focus is really specific. It's mainly women and girls from wealthy countries, and we show how you live with the least impact through our daily choices, through the way that we live, through our spending power, through everything we do. So things like household energy, getting our energy consumption down by 20%, or addressing food waste, or embracing less is more and dealing with this crazy world of overconsumption, or how you get from A to B with the least impact on the planet, or how we as women use our economic power to shape the kind of world we want to live in.
Why do you think, or to what extent are women uniquely impacted by climate change and therefore uniquely potent to address it?
So let me answer the potent one first. When I started 1 Million Women and I did my research, I found that in countries like Australia, that women make between 75 and 85% of the consumer decisions that affect the household's carbon footprint. And we have enormous power as consumers, and we're huge networkers. And so we have extraordinary power to shift our lifestyles and shift the way that we live, which is a huge contribution to the climate crisis. But we also know that women from more vulnerable countries and the developing world, women and children are the most impacted and the most vulnerable to climate change. And so it's that whole it's the whole thing, it's the whole circle.
Now, here at the Global Climate Action Summit, we've been celebrating and showcased the activities of people at all levels, but we're focusing on those below the level of national governments and organisations like yours, the non-profit groups. What do you believe 1 million women? I mean, first of all, do you have 1 million women?
We are. Well, it depends on what stat you look at,
okay.
But
we'll give you the benefit of the doubt there.
We are 800,000. Yeah, women and girls from every corner of the planet.
That's still pretty amazing.
It's pretty, yeah.
What do you think that 800,000 can achieve?
So, never ever underestimate the power of lifestyle choice. It is a big piece of the solution to climate change. You can't just fight for climate action; you have to live it too, and 800,000 women will tell 800,000 more, and will lead their communities. And our whole focus is how to get to net zero carbon living, how to reduce consumption, and all those other aspects that are a big contributor. And it's been a really big theme here at this summit that everybody, individuals, households, communities, cities, countries, governments, everybody has to act. And that means that all of us have a responsibility to literally through everything we do and how we live day to day is for the planet and not against it.
Okay. Have you been encouraged by what you've heard here at the summit?
It's a hard question to answer. I am, today I was so encouraged and so positive listening to the plenary sessions, and I don't know if you heard Al Gore in there, but and everybody that spoke today spoke of such progress and so many exciting things, and people rising up and rising, above politics, actually, and getting on with it. But, I feel there's something, this conference, this summit has a new level of urgency. And I've been to a lot of conferences and COPs, and there's always a level of urgency. But this one, it's even at another level. And you know, we have to act. We have to act right now.
Yeah.
And so that's from my point of view as individuals, we need to say, am I doing everything I can to live with the least impact on the planet?
Great to hear you echoing pretty much the sentiment of the words of the UN Secretary General earlier in this week, in the week in his speech. Looking forward to the Climate Summit in 2019. Let's just give a quick mention of your book. Go on, quickly.
So this just launched. This just launched earlier this week, and it's actually, my book. It's available across Australia and actually internationally. So it is really about how you profoundly change the way that you live and make that stick. And so, yeah, I would love you to get a copy if you can.
Okay, Natalie Isaacs from 1 Million Women, thank you very much for joining us on Step Up World today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's do a quick check-in on what you all have been saying on social media. Let's go over to our social station and check in with Nicole Perez.
Thanks, Raj. Today's program discussed both climate positivity and warned us of the challenges ahead if we refrain from acting. You've been sharing your thoughts on the discussion, so let's talk about a few of the messages now. So on Twitter, we have Dr. Leanne Kealoha Fox of Hawaii. She shares her fears when looking towards the future of climate change. She wonders whether she'll be able to live in her home by the year 2050. Our second tweet comes from Suzanne Grego from the Skull Foundation, where she shared an important call to action from a 16-year-old participant who reminded us that we need to go beyond Band-Aid climate solutions to real systemic action. Our third tweet comes from Gavin Price from Wales. He loved the Step Up World interview with Lehua Kamalu and noted her as a prime example of how athletes are affected by and acting on climate change. Thank you all for viewing our program and for helping us bring the world to the Global Climate Action Summit. Back to you, Raj.
Nicole, thank you, and thank you very much for being a fabulous social media correspondent. That's pretty much all we have time for on Step Up World. Please do carry on checking out all our interviews that we had on this show and this whole program, which will live now on the UN Foundation's Facebook. Do go and check it out. And as Nicole said, don't stop talking about the issues. Tweet us using those hashtags, StepUp2018 and GCAS2018. Talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, talk to each other as well. We hope you've enjoyed our show. We hope you've learned a few things, and we really hope that you have been inspired to act. If you're a world leader, we hope that you've been inspired by the commitments that others have made and that you will step up also, because we all need to. Okay. As a special treat to play us out, we're going to head back over to our music stage and we're going to hear from Rocky Duwani again. Thanks for joining us.
Whoa, 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 every day, in every way, oh, I'm gonna let my whole light shine. Every day, in every way, oh, I'm gonna let my whole light shine. On and on and on and on, for the world to see. Yeah, yeah. Oh, people, I am ready. Chapter new beginning. When every little step I take will reach for a higher ground. It's not gonna be easy. Fate will let it be. And I know with you by my side, it's all gonna be alright. I'll say, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright, so right. I say, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright, so right. Every day, in every way, oh, I'm gonna day, in every way. I'm gonna let my whole light shine on and on and on and on for the world to see. Yeah, yeah. Light up the darkness with the positive spirit. Oh, let the sun shining in with the wave of a joyful sound. Whether high or low, I will not be afraid to lift my head up, reach and touch the skies. I'll sing, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright, so right. I'll sing, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright, so right. Whoa, 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 hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright. Whoa, whoa, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright. All around the world I say, I believe we can shine a light so bright. No matter who you are, I believe we can shine a light so bright. I say, hey, I believe we can shine a light so bright.
This is JL Algo, Science Policy Associate of the Climate Reality Project Philippines, a proud Filipino and citizen of this earth.
I am Amira, an organizer from Puerto Rico.
As Lord Mayor of Copenhagen, I'm determined to act, but we cannot do it alone.
As Mayor of Cape Town, I am determined to act.
I'm from Ghana, and this is my call to action to everyone.
From Reno, Nevada, and this is my call to action.
This is my call to action.
And this is my call to action to everyone.
It's time to step up, world.
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 It is time to step up, world.
We are still in.
We are mayors, county executives,
governors, tribal leaders,
faith groups, colleges and universities,
businesses, cultural institutions, and investors.
And we support climate action to meet the Paris Agreement.
In the absence of leadership from Washington, D.C.,
We're part of a growing coalition representing nearly half of the U.S. population.
From all 50 states.
With the weight of 1/3 of the U.S. economy behind us.
We're pursuing ambitious climate goals, working together to take forceful action.
To ensure that the U.S. remains a global leader in reducing emissions.
We are still launched with commitments from cities, states, businesses, colleges, and universities.
Since the launch, faith groups, tribes, cultural institutions, and hospitals have joined the movement.
It is imperative that the world knows that in the U.S.,
the leadership necessary to meet our Paris commitment is found in city halls,
state capitals, universities, colleges, boardrooms, and businesses.
Together we will remain engaged with the international community as part of the global effort to hold warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, with 1.5 degrees as our goal.
And to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy
that will benefit our security, prosperity, and health.
We are still in because we have a moral imperative to act on climate.
Because climate action is good for our bottom line.
Because cities innovate and evolve when called upon.
We are still in to keep the planet safe for the next generation of Americans.
West Palm Beach, Florida is still in.
Washington State is still in.
Cliff Bar is still in.
We're still in, and we're all in.